Welcome to First a Follower podcast, presented by Youth for Christ USA. First a Follower aims to address the unique challenges and opportunities youth ministry leaders face today. Through engaging discussions and expert insights, we aim to provide practical guidance, relevant resources, and support for the spiritual formation of youth leaders as they navigate the complexities of reaching and discipling the next generation. I'm your host, Cory Huffman, and I work on the YFC USA Leader Formation Team. And on this episode, I'm welcoming on Siouxland YFC City Life staff, Drew Curiel, and author and researcher, Dr. Josh Packard. Drew Curiel is a former Youth for Christ student whose life was impacted by the gospel, and she was inspired to come on staff to help reach the next generation with that same message. Drew is an emerging young leader working as the Central City Life Manager for Siouxland YFC. Dr. Josh Packard is one of the foremost experts in the spiritual lives of modern American youth and an accomplished researcher in the sociology of religion and new forms of religious expression. He has authored numerous books and articles in both popular and academic outlets. His most recent publication is Faithful Futures: Sacred Tools for Engaging Emerging Generations. On this episode, Drew, Josh, and I are chatting about his new book and its helpful tools and insights for better engaging Gen Z and Gen Alpha. All right. Well, welcome, guys. Excited to be on the podcast with you both. Drew, how are you doing? How is it taking a break from working with the youth?
Great. I mean, I've always wanted to be on a podcast too, so subtle flex. This is exciting.
Nice. You can tell all your friends you're podcast famous.
Yep, I will.
And then the husband of Megan Packard, who is very famous amongst our listeners, Josh Packard. Welcome.
Thank you. That is exactly how I would like to be known, the husband of Megan Packard. That's super. Glad to be here. I
figured you would. And who's, between you and Megan, who would you say is the more important and more famous Packard? I think.
Oh, goodness. Okay. So years ago, I wrote a book called Church Refugees, and my wife summed up my career by saying, she goes, you're very important to a very small group of people. And I think that's a really nice way of saying this.
I love that.
She is by far the more important person.
Speaking of that, as we jump in, we both had a chance to read this. Josh, I really, really, really love this book. And I enjoyed it a ton. And I was just telling Leslie, our friend Leslie, before the cast that, I want to share it with people, but I'm going to have to order another copy to give to other people because I've written and folded pages. But as we dig in, Josh, as you wrote the book, and your team you work with and getting the research and stuff, how would you define like the age ranges for Gen Alpha and Gen Z? Because I know different groups will kind of move that just a little bit here and there, but just for our reference as we're going, how would you define that?
Well, thank you for reading, both of you. I mean, it really is the only thing you ever want as an author is for somebody to read it. And that's incredible. And it's great to be, have a chance to talk about it. So I make the case in the book that we shouldn't really be thinking about these lines about generations as hard and fast. I mean, especially when you move to even just across rural and urban lines, for example, or suburban and urban lines, not to mention all the other various demographic, race, ethnicity, background, et cetera. That it's not really particularly useful to try and put people in a box. But for points of reference, I do understand the utility of using these shorthands. So typically Gen Z now going up somewhere between the ages of 25 and 30 on the upper bounds, which seems kind of odd. So that would put, if you've got kids who are just coming out of college, probably, in their first jobs, maybe they're on the older side of Gen Z, and going all the way down to Gen Alpha are just sort of coming online. We don't know exactly when they'll end, but I mean, we're thinking about teenagers here, 13, 14 years old is where Gen Alpha would start by most, standard or conventional definitions of these things. Although it's not like, people sometimes think that there's like a central governing body that determines when these generations start and stop. Yeah. And it's really just like whichever scientists speak up first with the loudest voice, they get to decide. I mean, there's not like a formal process.
Yeah. And ultimately, it seems like if you're kind of in that cusp, you can listen to the things that define both and go, oh, yeah, maybe I'm more that. Or one of the things that I think, and Drew, I'll pass this to you in just a second, too. But one of the things that I felt like I really connected with right off the bat was your story of going to Calcutta, India, where you talk about, you've driven in big cities, you know how to get around traffic, you know how to deal with that stuff. And then you get to Calcutta and it's like, whoa, I don't know anything. This is crazy. I'm lost. Where do I go? What do I do? I think, I thought back to when I first was doing youth ministry, working in campus life with Youth for Christ, 20 years ago, being a middle school pastor for a little bit. And when my wife and I got invited back in to lead our high school group a year ago, I thought, oh yeah, we got the chops. We know what we're doing. We've been in this space before, and showed up and pretty quickly was like, okay, some of those things that worked really well are not working now. And doesn't seem to be connecting or resonating, or I can't, this was something that really hit perfect and it's just not happening, and had to kind of start to relearn and figure out, what's different. And so this has been helpful even at this point to kind of continue that journey. So I don't know, for Drew, maybe first thoughts for you as you just think about having gone through this book. Were there some kind of ahas or things that you're like, oh yeah, that I didn't think about that, or I didn't know that? Or is this pretty much like, yep, seen all of that, I know it?
I think this was really good too, because a lot of the things I was like, he gets it. Yes. Like, I was like, yep. Just wanting someone that listens, that's the main takeaway too. Of course, it's yes, you don't want someone giving you necessarily advice. It's are you here to listen? Also going back to the a lot of time in Youth for Christ, it's the 3 story, right? My story, your story, God's story. And so reading even about the India travels and stuff like that, so many times it's oh yeah, here's my story when I was a teenager, but doesn't mean that's exactly what they're going through. And then you even said in the book too about a middle school lock-in. I'm guilty. I'm I went to a middle school lock-in, so I'm always that'd be so fun. But obviously we don't do that anymore for many, many reasons. But just seeing I have so many different takeaways, and before I know so I'm a 2000 baby, so I think I have the best year because I don't have to guess my age, whatever the year is, that's how old I am. But I remember in middle school everyone's man, you should be a 90s babies are the best or whatever, and I remember man, I just was born 1 year earlier. But now I'm grateful, I guess, to be Gen Z, but it's just crazy because the kids that I work with, I'm they're also Gen Z. So different lines of that. And obviously Gen Alpha is way younger, but even in your book too, later on, you wrote about how we're there to be mentors and leaders, but not necessarily their friends. I'm ooh, I'm some of them, I'm oh man, they kind of are a friend, but I think it just depends on case by case scenario. Yeah, I could go on and on there. So I don't know where we want to start, Cory, but even
I think a couple that maybe we want to start with is the disaffiliated piece, and just looking at kind of reading through that of the way there's a large lack of trust, and obviously that's with this generation, but even probably a lot of people these days feel disaffiliated, right? And you talk about kind of this need for integrity and transparency, admitting when we're wrong. Can you maybe share a little more about what you guys are seeing with that disaffiliated piece and maybe why you think that is, Josh?
Yeah. So actually, I think the best way, I don't think I write about this in the book, but it's a way I talk about it a lot, is that a few years ago when I was giving a presentation about, young people and faith and trends and on and on. And it was to a Catholic group, and in the Q&A, one of the priests asked, why are young people leaving? Why don't they like us? And I said some hopefully very nice version of basically, that's a really good question to ask in 2002, but not a very good one to ask in 2022, because these kids didn't leave church. Their parents left church. And they didn't, even if they are unaffiliated, they didn't disaffiliate. And I think that distinction really, really matters, because trying to minister to a disaffiliated elder millennial like you, Cory, is hard, right? Like it's there's all this baggage, right? That they have like left, they've made a decision, like, I don't want to be a part of this anymore, blah, blah, blah. But really what we're seeing with a lot of teenagers today is that they come with actually no grammar whatsoever grammar in a metaphorical sense of like how to understand faith. And so here's the best way I know how to explain it. When I was a professor and I would teach sociology of religion, we would go on field trips to a mosque, a synagogue, and a Catholic and a Protestant church, if I could get all four of them. And as time went on, by the last time I taught this class, it was not uncommon at the beginning that my students had not been inside of a mosque or a synagogue. That was pretty normal. But then come 2019, the last time we did it, many of them, most, if not all, had not been inside of a Catholic church or a Protestant church either. So if you think for a second, like, what is it? You drive down the road, and we all work in religious spaces, and you see a church on the corner, you can probably guess literally what it looks like behind those doors. And if you were to walk in through those doors, what you would see, who you'd encounter, what it would look like, what direction you go. I bet you could even find the bathrooms if you walked into just a random church we know what it looks like and what goes on there. They have no idea. It is as foreign to them to imagine what's going on behind those doors as it would be for your average American to walk into a mosque and I remember even after years of doing it, I still felt like unsure of myself going into those other spaces. And to put yourself in those shoes of like, this is what our teenagers are experiencing. It's not that they don't like church. They often nothing church. I mean, if they've been, it's maybe for Christmas. They've been once or twice a year at most. I don't know if you see that where you are, Drew. I certainly see it with the chapter of YFC here that my wife works at. I mean, they just have no particular experience. And I think that's a massive difference. Like, you're not trying to get them back. You don't have to deal with all that baggage. You have to deal with a different set of challenges, which is they don't know anything about you. Mm-hmm. Or if they do know something, it comes from, what they see on social media or TV or whatever.
Yeah. Like most of the kids that we work with, like, spot on. They've never been to a church before. They don't know what are we going to do there? What's it going to be like? How long is it? Like, they just start asking questions.
Yeah.
And so I like how you said that it's not like they ever left it. It's just they've never been introduced to it. I know for me too, even growing up and going to church, that was not common either. Like, I know my family was quote unquote Catholic, but it's more of, we'll just go on Christmas, go on Easter. So even it was new for me too, going to a Christian church the first time. I'm like, why are these people so nice? Why are they drinking coffee? Like, it was just different. And so I know for sure for our kids, again, they're like, what's the big deal?
Yeah, that's good. And Josh, that was a good differentiation too, because I think as I read it, I was thinking about, the lack of trust in these spaces. It's not so much that they've lost trust or that it needs to be rebuilt. It just needs to be built, period, right? Like, they just need to get to know and understand in these spaces. No, that's super, super helpful. And I think Drew touched on a couple of the things in that. I think some of the pieces you talk about are listening. You talk about being transparent, talk about having integrity. What else would you say as you think about like some of the tools and ways we need to think about building up trust with this group?
Yeah, no, I'm really actually curious, Drew, to find out what you are finding, to see what you are finding to be effective in your context, because I think this does vary by context. One of the things we know, though, the data tell us are that, we're operating in what I call this low trust environment now. So this default position of, because you're a pastor, because you work at a church or a religious organization, that you deserve our trust, that doesn't exist more, by and large. And it's not just for churches, it's for every social institution. I mean, my neighbor is just dealing with a cancer diagnosis, and he's going to be fine. It looks like everything's on the up and up. But while he's waiting for the doctors to read the report, he fed all the information into ChatGPT and then sent it over to us. It was like, look, ChatGPT says I should probably need this amount of radiation. I was like, oh yeah. I mean, we don't this is WebMD to the next level, but really the way we think about it as sociologists is like, this is the symbol of like, we don't just trust our doctors. We don't just trust our politicians. We don't just trust our teachers or, our business leaders or our pastors and religious leaders. Like, we trust the people we know and have relationships with now, but we do not trust the people just because they occupy a position of authority. And that's a pretty significant change in our culture from 40 or 50 years ago, where title was everything. And that it hasn't been like it wasn't like there was any fall off the cliff moment. It's been a steady erosion. And this is well documented from Gallup and Pew and lots of other research entities of, about 2 or 3 percentage points a year we lose. We don't trust firefighters. We don't trust police. We don't trust the military, on and on and on. That's a big shift for our culture that I think you could make a credible case that coming out of World War II, our country trusted social institutions and their leaders more than any other country in the world, and potentially more than any other country ever. And now to be in the course of one lifetime, almost at the other end of that spectrum is even though there wasn't there was no like moment that had happened, that's a pretty big transition. Mm-hmm. And so it's had dramatic impacts on how we do ministry. So Drew, I'm curious, like what are you all doing now that's having, the most traction with young people?
Yeah. And I agree. When I read that in the book, I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah, I don't trust people. Like it's harder to trust things. And I know, like you said too, even in your book, that like growing up fast because of everything that we have access to, and like, YFC's heart and mission is building those relationships. So again, when kids come to our teen center, it's not like we have a program right away. It's they come, they do what they want to do. Hey, you can come hang out. You can go play. You can go. Sometimes we have kids literally just come and take a nap. And sometimes kids are like, oh my gosh, look at so-and-so is sleeping. I'm like, they probably had a long day. It's fine. Like they can take a nap if they want to. Like, so just creating more space for relationships to be built, because really our only program time is literally, again, we eat dinner. So I guess that's part of it. And then our small groups, it's not like we have an hour small group. It's more 20-minute small group. And it starts off with questions, and it's more to get them interacting. And then we'll tie it into obviously Jesus in the Bible. But again, it's just really wanting them to talk more and hang out, but not scheduling so many programs necessarily, but just saying, hey. And I love how you said too, you can belong before you believe. And I was like, oh my gosh, like that's so true and so good. Cause I know like other people, as long as we get them to believe, then, then we'll have good relationships with them. And it's like, obviously YFC, it's like, I've seen, it's like, it takes a whole, like the kids that are graduating this year were like my first kids that when I first started, like when I was 19, they were 6th graders. And so just seeing them like, man, for some of them, it's taken them this long. And again, it's an ongoing journey and process, but again, just showing up, listening, not trying to, I think when I first started, I thought, okay, we're going to go to coffee shops and read the Bible and just, but it's like, yeah, no, that's not it.
Oh, you will get to eventually, but so you even said it, Drew, like they come and we're just like, we just hang out, but you're not just hanging out. Like you're doing some of the most important work. Yeah. If we think about the context that they're coming out of, where they don't implicitly trust you because of your position, and they may not have much experience with religion in a formal way. So that hanging out work is like real important work. And the more intentional and structured strategic we are about it, I think, you can make gains even faster. But at the very least, we shouldn't be dismissive of that time. It's a really important time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and Josh, I know you're familiar with it too, and you talk a lot about it. But the Fuller, the research coming out from Fuller on Gen Alpha, their big thing is listening, adults who will listen to what they have to say. And you talk about the same thing of listening and being present, and, just how much more important that is than what our programs are, how perfect our content is, how sharp things are. Is there an adult who kids know cares about them and is actually listening to what they say? So,
yeah.
So
there's a lot of alignment with that. I mean, and so full disclosure, we're advisors on that Gen Alpha research with Fuller Youth Institute, and so there's a little bit of overlap between the listening, but it's not with us imposing it. It's that Brad and Kara and I and Megan, we are seeing the same things in the data. That it's I think where sometimes people get confused is they think that we're making these what we call normative statements about what you should be doing. And we're like, I'm not telling you that it's better or worse that kids show up expecting for people to listen to them or wanting for whatever. I'm just telling you the data are pretty clear that this is what's effective, is that if you can sit down and listen to a young person as they talk things out so they can begin to make some sense of them, adults have a really hard time with it in a lot of ways, because they think that when they listen to a young person, they're implicitly condoning everything that comes out of their mouth. But I don't think they're honoring kids enough, and I don't think they're being trusting enough, because if you listen to kids, they'll tell you, like, I know that adult is not agreeing with me when they listen to me, but I need a space to actually just get these things out into the, in a way, like in front of somebody who I know has my best interests in mind and will hear me out at least.
Yeah, that's good. And I don't know for Drew, I mean, so we're both doing ministry in different, we're all doing ministry in different kind of ways. And me this is one of the things as a millennial, thinking like, oh, I understand these young people. I came in and I feel like I'm a good listener. But really what I've come to realize more recently is I'm good at conversation. Like I'm good at getting kids to talk and to talk about themselves. And I'm not that I'm not listening to what they're saying, but I guess more what I was convicted by or challenged by in some of the stuff you wrote in the book was, what kinds of questions am I asking? So I can get them started, but I realize I'm not helping them go very deep. Like I'm not asking them like questions where they're really sharing how they're feeling in their heart and their things they're afraid of, like the deeper, more important things, which I know are really important to be heard, sharing that stuff. So, I felt like I walked away going, I need to learn some better questions to ask and practice them. Cause even I'll just, full transparency, last weekend, I had read some of this. I was like, okay, I'm going to try some good questions. I had a couple in my mind talking with kids, and I blank, and I just go back to asking some of the surface level stuff and talking about sports, which is fine. And it's still relational and good, but it's a good reminder of like, okay, this is like, it's going to take a little bit of work, a little bit of time. So I don't know for Drew, what your experience is with that, or if that's more natural, being generationally closer or not, but yeah, I'd love to hear from you too.
Yeah, so I loved whenever you did on page 158, the text to connect, like, daily emoji check-ins and stuff like that. And I've never done that. But one thing I realized is if I just said, hey, how are you feeling? Are you sad today? Like, like if I could sense something was off, like I would try and ask, but then that just kind of pushes them away. And so then I said, instead of me saying, how are you feeling today? I'm just going to say, how's the weather today? And you can send me back an emoji. If it's like a sun, it's good. Tornado, everything's up in the air right now. Like, so I felt like that's been really good for me, like to just check in. Cause it's not like, pressuring, and they don't feel like they have to like say, I'm really, really mad. But then when they send like an emoji, or if they just say it's cloudy today, oh, why is it cloudy? Then sometimes that's an easier way to like go into a conversation. So I know that's worked. And just like, again, the whole listening part, sometimes our center opens at 3:30. And I'm telling you, ever since I've worked there, I always will have a kid that comes to my desk at 3. And sometimes for me, I'm like, this is kind of, I'm trying to get things ready or whatever. And then I just have to pause and be like, hey, how was your day? And through that, I've had so many fruitful conversations. Again, they don't start off fruitful. It's more of like, oh my gosh, I'm so like upset about this teacher or whatever. And they just kind of go on and on. But then I think what's important is following up with them. So, hey, like you said, Miss Johnson, was upset with you. How did she react to you today? Or just like having those follow-up questions. And it's cool too, because like this is just one example, but this one girl, again, it started off from she was upset because her TikTok shop got stolen off her porch, to saying like, yeah, I didn't really eat today, but I'm super hungry. Okay, why is that? Like, and so now when she comes like, hey, did you eat at school today? No. Okay, but what's for dinner tonight? And then like, it's just, I think again, just following up from conversations instead of just, okay, that was just a conversation for the day, but following up, that's really helped me, my experiences.
Yeah, I totally hear that. So what you're referring to is that text to connect exercise. And I'll just point out that these are what we call sacred listening tools, and they're all free. I'm not trying to sell anybody anything. That you can find them on our website and adapt them and use them in your own context. Part of the problem that we're trying to solve is one that actually YFC, I think, has been really good at solving for decades now, which is how do you do relational ministry at scale? Mm-hmm. And it's this question of like, well, what happens when somebody tells you something? Do you have a way of following up? Like if you're working with a teenager whose grandmother died, do you have a way of knowing in a year that you should check back up with them on the anniversary of that death? Mm-hmm. And I think most people who are in youth ministry have, if you're my age, like I'm not going to be able to remember. I know I'm not going to be able to remember that. And so you're relying on some always not necessarily some great tools. And so we're not trying to solve that problem entirely. We're trying to do our part, because you're right, Drew, like those conversations that if you start with them intentionally, you can unlock a path that leads to things that are deeper. As long as you have sort of a plan. I think, Cory, what you're describing when you're like, I would start with these surface level things and we'd fall back into, I wouldn't know where the next question should go or the next one. That's why I think like having that plan matters, because so much of the relational ministry of my era, when I went to high school, I was in high school from 90, for only 4 years, 92 to 96. And so like that sort of middle school, high school for me is like late 80s into the early 90s that I'm in. But I think it was like largely this idea of, ask some questions or like get to know them a little bit so that then you can share the gospel with them. But lately I've been thinking about this as much more like learning a second language. I'm trying to learn Spanish now for the last couple of years and making some, decent progress, I guess. But, if it's one of these things where like, if somebody tells you Spanish, if they show it to you on a chalkboard and if they speak Spanish to you, you are not learning Spanish. Like you're learning Spanish when you start to actually try and speak it. So when we think about why is it so important for kids to be able to talk things out, why don't they just listen to the adult in the pulpit, tell them what they should believe? I think that's a good metaphor for understanding like, well, they can hear you in the pulpit. They can. But if what you really want is fluency with what is essentially a new language for them, thinking about God and what the plan is for your life, they've got to be able to talk. And it means they're going to make a billion mistakes, just like I do when I speak Spanish right now. I mean, it's basically incomprehensible to anybody who actually speaks Spanish. It's just me and the little owl on my phone that can understand each other, right? But I'm learning. I'm getting there. And at some point, I'll be able to speak with fluency because there's a really patient person on the other end of that. So thinking through, like what Drew's saying is like, these initial conversations about these things are really just a way to get them to begin working this out. And like you said, maybe it takes the whole, what has it been, 4, 5, 6 years for some of your kids.
Well, and it also goes back to the couple things. One is, do we care about them and are we authentic? Because I think we know that if kids know that our posture and our heart is that we care for them and love them, they're going to be a lot more gracious for us to ask some, the wrong questions or take our time to get there or whatever. So I think that's a piece of it. But also this piece of like digging in deeper compared to maybe, when we were in high school, in middle school, where it was a little bit just get them in the door, share the gospel, and they're good. In YFC, we talk about trying to make lifelong followers of Jesus, right? Which is, I think, everybody's goal, is not kids that or young people who are going to hear the gospel, make a decision, and then end up going away, which, I've got a lot of millennial friends and older friends who have walked away from the church in some, really dramatic ways. So it does remind me that maybe we weren't doing it right, even with our generation. So that belonging piece is so important to help people stay more long-term and have that community piece. So that's really good. And on that note too, I think another kind of aha for me, and I saw this a little bit in the Fuller stuff, but you talked a little bit more about it a little bit more, Josh, was the loneliness piece. And this I think will go in, it connects with a number of these different pieces, but and you talked about, there was something in there about that you quoted about the amount of loneliness people feel equates to smoking a certain amount of cigarettes a day, or something. It was something like that. And now I had it and I lost it. But I just thinking about what kids are going through and that the way it's actually affecting them physically and beyond. Could you say more about what you have seen with that? And then Drew, I'd love to hear a little bit from you too, from your vantage point of, if you're seeing the same things or not.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the loneliness epidemic is stunning. I mean, it's people have always been lonely, and there's a difference between being alone and being lonely for sure. Those are not necessarily the same. Loneliness is a felt state. It doesn't necessarily mean that if you're alone, you're definitely lonely. But when we, as being social scientists, have measured this, it's always been the oldest generations that are the loneliest because, for all the things that you can probably guess about losing jobs, losing family members, losing friends. losing mobility in many cases. And so, and on and on. And starting about 2015 with this big Cigna's a big health conglomerate, and then consistently after that in a variety of studies finding that it's now young people that are the loneliest. And then when we tie that to actual health outcomes, that's where we get this kind of headline grabby statistic that, acute loneliness carries the same health risks as smoking a significant number of cigarettes. I can't remember what the number is either.
It's like 13 or something.
Yeah. That it really has these dramatic consequences on your health. Now, I think that's important to understand for people who are working in youth ministry, because we obviously care about the health and happiness of the kids that we're working with. But also, I think rightly, when I have said those things in the past, the audience has reminded me okay, but we're not clinicians. We're not physicians. We are caring about their souls. That's interesting, I guess, to know, but I'm trying to get them closer to God. Does loneliness have anything to do with that? And I think what we find pretty consistently is yes, it also impacts that. That is solving that problem is also our work to do. Wherever two or more are gathered is a central enough starting place for knowing that, religion happens in a community. And then we can get to all the science behind it, which is your chances of sustaining religious life through all the ups and downs of your actual life are basically, non-existent if you're trying to do it alone. We need we are people that are designed to do long-term things together. And hopefully that involves religion. We all want, religion to be a long-term thing for these kids. And so that means they need to be in a community, and they're not likely to be able to sustain it, even if they get really on fire like teenagers can for a short period of time, and things that they can sustain for them, by themselves. It's not really going to hold up over the bumpiness of life long term.
Yeah.
And I feel like with the whole social media thing, I think it's so true. Whenever I read that sentence, I was like, oh, my generation. It's Gen Z's the loneliest generation. And again, I think going online, you're looking for connection. Even me too. It's when you post something, oh, who's going to like it? And it's and then I've talked to with the kids at our teen center, let's say you get 13 likes on a picture. You're devastated. You're what is that? And then I talk it out loud with them. I was wait, if there's 13 people in this room right now, oh my gosh, Drew, I love your hoodie, or oh my gosh, your hair. If there's 13 people complimenting you, you'd be oh my gosh, this is too much actually. But for some reason online, it just doesn't.
If I get 13 likes, I feel pretty good about that.
on the picture of your hair, if you have
anything, on anything, to be honest.
Yeah, so I don't know. It's just you're looking for that connection to people, and then of course, I think the loneliness part comes in. It's whenever, again, when you're posting, sometimes you do post yourself, but it's you're posting, what are you doing? Who are you with? And so if you're not with people, then you kind of feel dang, I wish I was with someone, or I wish I was doing that, or whatever. It's the whole comparison thing. But again, I even have friends too that will tell me I genuinely have two good friends, or even, family members, you're my only friend. And so it's just, I think for me, since obviously I have a network at Youth for Christ, and I do have friends. So it's it's harder for me to see that stat, because I'm I feel I have a good community, but it's eye-opening. And I think it does make sense. If I look around at people that are my age, or again, younger people, at the teen centers, and you already know they're constantly on their phones too. And I love how you talked about that. Most people just think, oh, it's a bad thing. Let's just get rid of the phones and go back to in person. But it's just I agree too with, I don't know who said it, but it's it's good and it's bad. It's not all bad. Yeah. It's not all good. But again, there's some connections that I have through Instagram, and it's oh, I know they're only on Instagram, so that's my way of communicating. Or it was kind of funny because I have a friend, she's a couple of years younger than me, and I found this whole Bible study on Discord. And so she's been doing this for a year, and I've been on it a couple of times, and she went to Florida for spring break to meet up with all these people on the Discord. She brought her dad though too. And I told Cory, I'm that's because, we have trust issues, as Gen Z. So she brought the dad. So but it's just cool to see there is a community out there. And again, I think just the negativity of it, it's just, again, when it starts comparing, and you already know there's dangers of being online too, pornography being one of the biggest ones, but again, it's both.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's I know this is not a parenting podcast, but I mean, I'll just use my own son as an example. As Megan and I were thinking about, how do we do this? How do we do that? We don't want to shut it down so that he doesn't have access to it, because that cuts him off from a big component of what's going on in his generation. And at the same time, it's important to remember that these tech companies do not have the best interests of your kids in mind. I mean, it's the recent court case, where the jury just found the Meta liable for addictive behavior among teenagers. I think that shows, that they really don't care about your kids. They care about keeping your kids online. Yeah. They do not care about your kids.
Yep.
And so when we thought through, what do we want to do with our son? It was, we're restricting his access, and certainly no accounts. My biggest fear, I told him, is anything with a like button. Anything that externalizes your self-worth into a click is incredibly problematic. And I think that it's, there are armies of PhDs at these companies who are thinking about ways to more or less exploit the attention of your children. And and I don't mean, they're not evil. Like, that is just their job. They're trying to exploit my attention too. And a 15-year-old's brain is in development is no match, and his social circles are no match for all of those really smart people who are spending their entire professional lives thinking, how do I keep you here for 5 more minutes, and how do I get your whole identity tied up onto this machine? Our job, I think, as ministers, is to figure out, exactly what you said, Drew. Like, how do we get them to think about the ways that God wants you to show up on Instagram, and like, not to disregard, Snapchat, but how do we use it? Is there a way to use Discord channels and chats for good? And can you live out Christian values in these online spaces? And that to me feels like a much more productive and useful conversation than, it's good or it's bad. But we do need to understand the context that these companies are operating in.
And this is probably where it's a little different for like some of us, who are a little older in ministry still versus somebody who's a little younger is, I think, at least I'll speak for myself. I tend to I kind of saw it a little more black and white of like, yeah, we use it, but it's not great. Like, it's kind of the good versus bad, as opposed to the complex and nuanced. And so even some of the things you raised in the book kind of got me thinking a little bit more in depth, the online life versus the IRL, in real life. And, and the fact that like, it's not totally separate. Like, for me, what I do online, like my online life, like I'll post some pictures or post a couple thoughts. Like, my community is not online. My community online is people that I'm also friends with offline, right? Like, so it's kind of separate. Whereas the kids we're working with, realizing like that is also a piece of their community. So when I'm up front giving a message and saying, hey, you just need to put your phones down so you can spend time with God and do this and be with people. In my mind, I'm thinking like, when I take a break from my phone or from social media, it's really helpful and healthy, but I'm not losing community versus kids who, if I'm asking them to do that, I'm also asking them to step away from significant community and whatnot in their life. So just kind of reframing that of like, for us, some of us in ministry needing to understand it's nuanced and complex, but even as maybe as parents and ministers or ministry leaders, is helping to give the lens to look through, biblical lens and, all these different ways to kind of approach it, in a smart way and in a way that, like you said, that honors God. I think you use that example with your son of getting on Minecraft and make Minecraft better, so which I love, because I've got a 12-year-old son, I've got a 17-year-old daughter, and kind of that idea of like, I know that kids want to have a lot of purpose, but helping go, well, this is part of your living out of your faith too. And how do you be faithful in this space and be the same person you are? So I think that takes some reframing for us as people who are leading and working with kids too, to encourage that and have the tools to do that.
Cory, I did want to add to that. I will say, like, every time we have camp and we do like take the kids' phones away, because it's more of like, hey, we really want you to focus. I think that is a good thing, because so many of them are like, oh my gosh, like, and I think it's different because, again, like, they're around a community, they're around like their peers, but it's like, it is so crazy. Whenever we leave camp, they're like, I didn't even, at first they're like, I don't know what I'm going to do without my phone. And then when they have that amazing week of just like, having fun, worshiping together, all that stuff. And they're like, man, like, I can't believe I was so panicked that I wasn't going to have it. So again, there's so many good things, so many bad things. Like, it's like, I don't know, it's such a hard one, but it's like, I really do see the benefits sometimes of like unplugging them too, just so they can really like have those interactions.
But that's a good differentiation though, of like at a camp setting or a space where you're providing community and alternatives to being on the phone, you know, they're unplugging from one thing, but plugging in, you know, metaphorically to something else. And, you know, as opposed to me, like telling my daughter, you need to get off your phone for, you know, a week, and she's just sitting around the house doing chores or doing nothing. Like, I don't think that's going to work very well, or she's going to feel very good about that.
So true.
Drew, are you starting to see it? What I feel like I'm hearing more and more about is like teenagers themselves either saying, you know, this isn't good for me, I need to find a way to, you know, reduce the amount of time I'm spending on social, especially, or in fact, just, I was overhearing a group of what appeared to be high school students sitting at a restaurant next to me, like, y'all, we're right here, let's just put our phones away. Like, which is a thing I think I wouldn't have heard like 5 years ago. Are you seeing that with the teenagers that you work with too? Are they like skeptical of this, or are they growing wary of it?
I feel like I still see a lot of them on their phones, and a lot of them still like actively, like, that's like kind of their world. I would say, like, at least for me, I think I'm an older Gen Z, basically. I'm on the like cusp, but I definitely think like people my age, that's exactly how we feel. Like, I'm more of like, if I go out to eat or something, it's like, I don't want to be on my phone. This is just personal conviction, but even like Holy Week, it's like, I don't want to be on my phone for Holy Week. I'm like, I don't need it, you know, like, and I even put to Cory, like, I'm kind of grateful because I grew up like with not a lot of like finances and all that stuff, whatever. And so I didn't get a phone until high school. And that was like, I could have gotten a phone earlier. We just didn't have the money for it. And I'm kind of grateful for that because, again, it was just like, okay, like that wasn't like my normal. And so like, I didn't even get Snapchat till probably after high school. But even after I got high school, I think since I got it later, I was like, I was on it for a couple of years and I'm like, I really don't need it. Like, and so I deleted Snapchat. I haven't been on Snapchat for a few years now, but I don't know. I think it's just, I'm off TikTok too. So that's just me. I'm like, I like joined everything. And then it's like, like, I really don't need this. I don't need that. But then it's hard because then it's like, you want to stay connected to like the youth that we're working with. Drew, did you see this on TikTok? I didn't. Just show me. Like, but yeah.
Wait, if you're not on TikTok, Drew, how do you know how to dance? That's where I learn all of my dancing.
I know, it's hilarious because the kids will always just say like, Drew, like, we'll teach you, or so they'll like teach me or whatever. But I'm like, even to me, I'm like, in my head, I'm like, this is not dancing, but I'm like, that's dancing to them. It's dancing to them. So I'm like, I'll do it.
I don't know. I was just at our local chapters Friday night. I mean, this is back in the fall, and I was watching and I'm like, they're all doing these like coordinated line TikTok. They're doing TikTok dances on Friday at the hangout space.
Yes.
Were you doing them, Josh?
No, I was there to pick up my son. Who was, doing whatever insane tricks on his scooter that terrified me.
You might sell more books if you publish some videos of you doing TikTok dances. It's maybe I
would certainly,
but it might not be worth it. Might go the opposite direction. I see.
Yeah.
Okay. The last piece that I think also jumped out at me, and part of this, some of this, Josh, I'm working with these kids, but obviously having kids that are in this age range too, is the piece about growing up fast and slow. I just think that's so intriguing and interesting. This idea of like this generation is taking in so much information and is able to see so much in front of us. And I mean, in an overwhelming amount, which I know contributes to so much of the other issues, but in certain ways they're growing up very, very fast. But then in like the practical side, it's more slow. And this is something I see, with my kids and kids I work with a little bit, where like I think back, my wife and I talk about this all the time. We were, 16, 17, and we were working our job, a part-time job. We were doing sports. We were doing our school stuff. And we were much more independent. We were out with our friends all the time on the weekends. And when we graduated, we were ready to get out of the house, go do our thing. You know, my kids are not ready to be independent. They're not ready to step out and do those things. And I think there's been a part of me that's going, no, you need to be ready. You need to do this, like almost frustrated with that. But even reading this helps kind of go, okay, I see why it is. And maybe we just got to shift even as parents or as leaders, got to shift a little bit how we engage and, you know, maybe be okay that they need a little more time to develop. And I know some of that's COVID too, at least for like our daughter who's 17. But yeah, I don't know if you see that as much, Drew, with the kids you work with, or if you guys have adjusted even in the way you're kind of helping as they're getting older and more close to that graduation time of like, yeah, what's that look like as they're moving on, and are they moving on? Like, I feel like I've had kids want to linger around who are graduated because they're not really ready to step out now, you know?
Yes. Josh, you go first, actually.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, I think it's really clear to me that we are asking more of our teenagers than we have ever asked of them before. And somehow adults, though, still have this notion in their heads that, like, they should be ready to move on from the house at 18. And it's like, well, how much more are you going to pile on to the ages between, 10 and 18 before it becomes reasonable to expect that they might stick around longer? I mean, it's, we're only capable of developing so fast in terms of, just biologically. And so when you start thinking about it, because I think the reason adults have that, like older adults especially have this in their brains, is because they think all of that online stuff, that is ancillary, that is extra, that is additional. What they really need to be focused on is all this in-person stuff. And once they master the in-person stuff, then they are quote unquote ready and they can leave. But if you think about if you really think about for a second, what it would be like if you sent a kid who's 18 years old, who had never had any online experience out into the, quote unquote real world, and all they had ever had was in-person stuff. I'm not so sure how equipped they are to actually handle college. I mean, every textbook is online now. Every bit of, navigating, picking their classes, communicating with professors, finding a social group, even a lot of their, religious stuff would be online. Mm-hmm. What job are they going to get that isn't online, or, what industries are they going to be wholly left out of because they don't know how to communicate through social media and other things. So I think adults are like living in a fantasy land a lot of times by thinking, that if they would just dispense with all, because what they don't recognize, the growing up fast part, like you mentioned, is like, yeah, these kids are actually, making loads of progress every day in mastering what makes up maybe the largest chunk of the economy at this point, and a significant, if not the majority part of their social life, which is all happening digitally. Yeah. And so I think that's really important for us to keep in mind, is like, we're asking so much more. Of course, it's going to take longer. On you're right though. The data show that, like, the growing up slow part. I mean, they leave the house later than ever. They get married later than ever. They graduate later than ever. They also do less drugs than they've ever done. They have less premarital sex than they've ever had. So there's like all these good and bad things that go along with this growing up slow part. I think that these, by older adults, I mean me, 45, and we are sort of living in la la world over here, where we think we can have our cake and eat it too.
Yeah.
I know when I read that, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm guilty, because I've only lived in this apartment with my roommate in July, it's going to be 3 years. So I moved out when I was like after college. Like, it wasn't even like during college. It was more of like, oh, I went to a community college, I might as well just stay home. I don't know if that's a generation thing or like kind of a Latina thing. It's like, you just stay with your family until you get married or whatever, it's like, but I'm not married either. So when I saw that statistic, I'm like, yep, that's me too. Oh, like the growing up fast. Like when Charlie Kirk was killed, I literally I only found out about it because like 5 teenagers messaged me about it. Like, did you see it, Drew? Did you see, like, go online? Did you see it? And I'm like, oh my gosh. And so like, I think, again, just so much access to everything. It's like, yeah, it does make you grow up faster, but I do see the part where it's like growing up slow is like applying for jobs or thinking about post high school. And again, even me too, I thought like, oh yeah, of course, right after high school, it's college. And I was like a first gen student in my family. So like, I just knew I'm like, this has never been done before. I really want to do it. But like now I'm seeing that there's a lot of people that are like, I don't even really want to do college. Like, I don't know what I want to do with my life. And so the ways that we kind of like equip our seniors, and that's what I've seen too, actually. When I first started, like we didn't really have a lot of seniors because they were all working and involved in other things. But now like we've been having seniors last like the whole time. Where was I going with? Oh, but we go on a couple college visits. I've only done that once. And again, they liked it, but again, it's not like they wanted to go. So then this year we're trying something different. We're going to say, we're going to go visit some other young adult Bible studies in the community. So it's like, hey, here's some options. But we're still just trying to figure that out too. Cause it's like, man, like you guys have been with us for so long, but now it's just like, okay, get plugged into a church. But like what you were saying, Josh, in your book, it's like, that's so not normal. So it's like, I think starting them
because they're going to age. You're doing the young adult Bible studies because they're going to age out of YFC's range, right? Is that, do I understand it correctly, Drew? Like, so you're trying to help them with that train. I think, man, that's such a good idea. Like, I get like YFC can't, you can't be a YFC from 13 to 30 or whatever. Like, there does need to be a bracket around these things, but we often don't pay enough attention to those transition moments, whether it's to college or just out of YFC to into a church or community, some version of all that. Like, so good job for y'all of like actually doing these sort of like facilitated handoffs. I think that's super smart.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, that is good. And I think Drew, you and I might've been talking about this, but with this same thing, it seems like, like sometimes kids that we're talking to just can't think ahead to some of the things we want them to think about because, and maybe it's because there's so much in front of them right now. Like you're saying, Josh, they're taking in so much, they're learning so much and developing in certain ways that thinking about the future at the same time or too far into the future is like, it seems like it's impossible for some kids, and, and I tend to be like, well, we used to do it. We had this planned out or we had this thought, but kind of forgetting that I also wasn't dealing with the same kind of anxiety, seeing the same kind of stuff that they're taking in as well. So maybe even, Josh or Drew, like what would you say to leaders who are kind of like leaders and or parents, who are trying to help these young people think to the future and plan ahead, even though it might be really, really hard for them to do that?
Drew, you first or me?
I'll go because I'm like, that's like it's a good question.
Do it.
I would say that like my biggest advice for like looking ahead, I would just tell them, I'm like, take it one day at a time. And I know that's like not technically planning, but it's just like, you don't have to have all the answers right now. Like God will show you. So it's like, just take it one day at a time, give it your best today. So I'm like, I know that's kind of a vague answer though. Next. Okay.
Yeah,
because you're Gen Z.
But it's ask one more question. Take it, get today, and then tomorrow will come tomorrow. I mean, I think, one of the things that in terms of like, what's the misfit between the way we have traditionally done ministry and the way these generations operate? And I keep coming back to the container of time that we have historically like contained ministry inside of time containers that actually reflected a relatively small slice of the population. I mean, stable home environment, usually that meant white, suburban, middle and upper class, people. And when my wife started working here at our local chapter and started telling me some of the stories about what their kids are going through, I mean, divorce, and I mean, it was just like the baseline, right? Like that doesn't even begin to scratch the surface of some of the chaos that is going on at home. It made me realize like what a bizarre notion of like, I grew up in a Lutheran church. Confirmation happened between, 6th grade and 8th grade. You went Wednesday nights, you got confirmed in this way. I mean, how preposterous for these kids that are growing up in this situation to think that they could possibly go every Wednesday night to a confirmation class, for 3 straight years or even 2. And when we give up that notion of time and let it be on God's clock, not on a clock that we've established, I think it more reflects the realities of the kids that we're encountering today, whose lives are not as straightforward and linear. I mean, they never were as much as we like to think that they were. And now it's just abundantly clear with the amount of diversity in our country that they don't all fit into these neat time containers. Some kids are going to get there in a matter of weeks. I worked at a summer camp, as I talk about in the book, and you can, I know what you can do in the course of a week, even in the summer. Mm-hmm. And some of them are going to take years. And a lot of that is just reflective of what their life situation is. And so not expecting that those kids will all follow, fit into the same pattern. And not only do I think it's important for parents and like direct frontline youth workers to understand, I think it's really critical for the leaders, the executive directors and other people working in chapters to understand too, so that when they're talking with Drew and they're like, Drew, you've been working with this kid for 4 years, and they still won't even they don't even know how to, when they say, chapter and verse in the Bible, they still don't even know what that means. Instead of coming down on Drew, you're like, good job, way to stick with them. Like, it's going to happen. And it's on the Holy Spirit's time. And, this is not all our work to do. So that would be my biggest advice, encouragement, is just to rethink how you're handling these time containers.
That's good. It's really good. Well, as we move to wrapping up in just a moment, Josh, I'm going to ask you to maybe kind of lead us in just a short little bit of reflection to wrap up. But before that, I just want to encourage our folks. I mean, this has been a great conversation. There's so much richness in this book, and we didn't even hardly talk about it. Within all these topics, there's also, you guys have listening tools, sacred listening tools embedded in here to help people try things with young people, and examples and kind of a template of what to do, which I think is really great too. I haven't used one yet, but I've been kind of looking through going, okay, how might I use that? And I'm excited to try it. So encourage people to go out and get this book. And then Josh, you have your website, futureoffaith.org, right? Which also includes, people can sign up for a newsletter that has information. There's resources. Is there anything you'd want to say about that to just encourage people to be able to utilize that?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, it's on the sacred listening tools. My favorite one is the mapping trusted relationships. And we do it in workshops all the time. And I had somebody, at the end of it, they said, we got the information in 45 highly relational minutes that it takes me a whole year to get, which is such affirmation for the way you've built that tool. So if you're going and looking at the tools and you're thinking about which one you might want to start with, I would encourage, maybe think about the mapping trusted relationships one. I love those tools. My co-founder, Megan Bissell, builds them. They're incredible. You can find more information about the book. It's Faithful Futures. You can find it at faithfulfuturesbook.com or on the Future of Faith website. There's loads of resources there. Again, all of that is free. The book, my publisher won't let me give you the book. Although there are ways, actually, you can get a free book on the website too, because I have all these author copies. I don't know what to do with. But the rest of the stuff, we really try and give away as much of it as we possibly can.
That's awesome. Cool. Well, thanks, Josh, for that. Would you, as on all these episodes, I'd like to give us a chance to just stop and be centered and quiet for a moment. Would you be able to lead us in just a little bit of a time of reflection or practice in that way?
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. This is something that I've been thinking about through this season of Lent, and there are this set of psalms called the Psalms of Ascent. They're these pilgrimage psalms that people would say on their way to Jerusalem as they were sort of literally heading up the hill. Right. And so these are not songs for being done. They are songs for being on the road. And I think about our young people that are on the road, but also Drew, it's been so lovely to be here with you. I mean, as we've alluded to and pointed out a couple of times in this conversation, it's weird to have it in a way, because we're talking about Gen Z as though you are not also Gen Z, which you are. Like a lot of times, I think it's important for us to remember, especially at places like Youth for Christ, that the people who are doing a lot of the ministry with Gen Z and Gen Alpha are also really close to, if not in those generations too. They are also on the road. So anyway, this is Psalm 131. It sort of sits, sort of kind of right in the middle of these Psalms of Ascent, and I'll just read it. It goes like this. O Lord, my heart is not lifted up. My eyes are not raised too high. I do not occupy myself with things too great and too marvelous for me. But I have calmed and quieted my soul like a weaned child with its mother. Like a weaned child is my soul within me, O Israel. Hope in the Lord from this time forth and forevermore. Amen.
Amen. Awesome. Thank you, Josh. Well, thank you, Josh. Thank you, Drew. It's been just a pleasure to get to hang out with you guys and dive into this conversation, and we could easily spend a couple more hours. quite easily on it.
Thanks, Josh, too. Thank you, Cory. I will say,
thanks,
my executive saw this on my desk. He bought one for everyone in our chapter, so everyone's going to be reading it.
Oh, wow, that's so great. Thank you.
Yep.
First to Follower is a podcast from Youth for Christ USA. The views and opinions shared by hosts or guests are their own and don't necessarily reflect the official positions of YFC or any partnering ministry. This podcast is for encouragement and general information only, and it isn't meant to provide legal, medical, mental health, or theological advice. If you enjoyed the content, please like and subscribe. And if you would like to learn more about how to get connected with Youth for Christ in your area, visit yfc.net.